Congratulations, Guardians of the Galaxy. You have managed to earworm yourself into my brain because I will no longer be able to listen to all of those songs that I generally do without thinking of you. Hey everyone, Divi here with a movie review, and this time it is for the movie that an awful lot of us were waiting eagerly because this is probably the first original movie that's part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe since, what, Iron Man? I think Iron Man was the very first one because that wasn't a sequel, it was the very first one. After that you had The Incredible Hulk, but that was kind of sort of a sequel to Ang Lee's Hulk, even though Ang Lee's Hulk doesn't have to do anything with the cinematic universe, and they made sure of that with the new S.H.I.E.L.D. series, but this is the first very original property that we've never even heard of, and yet they went ahead, made a movie about it, dared to make a movie about it, and now here I am to finally talk about it. And of course I am talking about Guardians of the Galaxy. Not to be confused with Rise of the Guardians, like an awful lot of movie theaters are doing across the country right now. And Guardians of the Galaxy is about this band of misfits, including Star-Lord, aka Peter Quill, Gamora, Drax the Destroyer, Rocket Raccoon, and Groot, who are these weird bunch of swords that come from different planets, have these different origins. They all come together to face the evil of Ronan the Accused, who is bent on destroying civilizations across the galaxy. And that's one of the things that the trailers managed to fool you with that I really enjoyed about this movie, is that even though the premise sounds kind of routine, it actually has a few layers that I wasn't expecting. There's this really witty, I don't want to say banter because that makes it sound like it's from the dialogue perspective, but there's different things tying into this one little MacGuffin, so to speak, which is this orb that Peter, or aka Star-Lord, finds in this tomb of sorts that everybody wants for their own personal agenda. And I love how they were able to intertwine all these different factions and have them all connect because of this one orb that everybody's looking for. Because I thought it was just going to be a straightforward movie of having our team of misfits banding together through this common purpose and fighting this one evil, which eventually that's where the movie ends up in, but the way they get there has all these little twists and turns that you weren't really expecting. The best way I can put it is that it deals with bounty hunters the only proper way to do bounty hunters. And since this movie deals with a talking raccoon and a walking tree, there's no way that you can take this kind of material seriously. And in fact, the comic book is practically a comedy. And they went ahead, took that approach and incorporated it into the movie. And none other than James Gunn was able to take that material and really make it flow from scene to scene. Like, the humor felt genuine, the action felt genuine. And on top of that, and I actually gotta be honest, I was a little surprised with this, there's an awful lot of heart in this movie. In fact, the very first scene in this movie, I was like, wow, way to punch me in the nuts, Guardians. And I gotta be honest, I gotta give mad props to James Gunn, who not only co-wrote this, but also, of course, directed it, because he was able to treat so many aspects of this movie correctly. We need to give this guy some more work because, first of all, this movie is gorgeous. The visual effects are outstanding. I would be quite shocked if this doesn't get nominated for Best Visual Effects at the Oscars this coming year. And I hardly say this, but see this in IMAX 3D. IMAX 3D, it's amazing, especially because there's certain, actually, about a good maybe 60 to 65% of this movie is in IMAX. There's several scenes that are in that wide, large format, and it's just beautiful. The 3D works really well because the majority of the movie takes place in space, so obviously you're going to have an awful lot of elements popping, not only in terms of color, but also the objects themselves. They look very three-dimensional, even though the movies are three-dimensional. But you get what I'm saying. It looks outstanding. And like I said, James Gunn handles the comedy very well because he has done comedy before, even though it's been mixed with other genres like horror, and he kind of does the same here, mixing it in with not only science fiction but also a superhero movie. So many scenes are edited together and the timing is impeccable to really get an awful lot of laughs out of me. This movie is hilarious, but he was able to balance it with an awful lot of heart. It almost reminded me of Edgar Wright and the style of his movies, and it makes Wright's departure from the Ant-Man movie all the more bitter. Because to be quite frank, this is as closest to an Edgar Wright superhero film as we're ever gonna get. And he was also able to balance the characters out, because you're dealing with 5 Guardians. And one could have easily overshadowed the others, especially Rocket Raccoon, because out of all of the Guardians, I think everybody was looking forward to seeing what Rocket was in action the most. I mean, you gotta admit it, especially when they announced that Bradley Cooper was gonna be doing the voice. Everyone was like, how does he sound? How does he look? He's a freaking talking raccoon. So he was the character that everybody was looking forward to the most. And yeah, he stole the show. And so did Drax. And so did Gamora. And so did Groot. And so did Star-Lord. Everybody had their scenes. And everybody didn't overshadow the other. They all balanced well in the end. And you really can't decide who's your favorite character. I mean, you probably can after thinking about it for a while. But as you're leaving the theater, you think about all the great moments that each character had, whether it be through humor, or through being a badass, or through being developed as a character. Freaking Groot has only one line. I am Groot. And yet, he was able to generate an awful lot of heart that this movie contains. An awful lot of heart centers around Groot's character and his relationship with Rocket. It was very endearing. It's almost like every character that Vin Diesel provides the voice for has to have that moment that tugs at people's heartstrings, whether it be as the Iron Giant or as Groot. And while we're on the subject of performances, everybody was great. Chris Pratt as Star-Lord, he nailed it. He was destined to play this. I'll admit, there's 1 or 2 scenes where you can kind of tell that he's missing Parks and Recreation, because I'm pretty sure that they just filmed the final season. Either that or maybe they're filming it, so he's kind of reminiscent of good old Andy from that show, and you can kind of see a little bit of Andy in there. But for the most part, he really does hone in that role as Star-Lord. And Vin Diesel, like I said, even though he only has one line, he changes the way he says the line to where it's almost like he's talking with regular words, any other word besides I and am and Groot, like Rocket says. And Bradley Cooper was almost unrecognizable as Rocket. There were a couple of lines here and there where you're like, that's Bradley Cooper, but much like Star-Lord, for the most part, I'm like, wow, that really is Rocket. Wow, not only can this guy act in live action, but he can definitely do voice work as well. And what, in my opinion, was one of the biggest surprises was Dave Bautista, or just plain simple, Batista, the WWE superstar, as Drax the Destroyer. He was made for this role because he's meant to be this very deadpan character who's kind of oblivious to metaphors, and he's awesome too. And not only that, but you feel for his character based on his backstory. The only actor, or I should say actress, that was probably the weakest in the bunch would be Zoe Saldana as Gamora, but even she had some moments that were awesome, and her as a character was pretty cool, even though, like I said, compared to all the other guys, and I know it sounds just a tiny bit sexist because she's the only girl here, she was the one that will have probably the least space in your memory when it comes to you remembering the cool moments that these characters had after leaving the theater. But hey, she shouldn't feel too bad, because underneath her would probably be the villains. Now, the villains in this movie were actually rather cool. They looked cool. Lee Pace as Ronan the Accused, he was great, alright? He definitely felt, he looked like he was not necessarily having fun with the role, but you can tell that he brought his A game to the table as that villain. Would I have loved to have seen some backstory or some development with this character? Yes, I really wish I could have seen a little bit more of that, but what we got from Pace in terms of a performance and in terms of that character and the way that he was designed was really cool. He genuinely felt intimidating. And Michael Rooker as Yondu, there you go, that was his name, almost forgot it. Yondu, he was great. You know, it's Michael Rooker, so he's somewhat channeling Merle from The Walking Dead, but that's the type of character that was needed for the character of Yondu, and he was cool too. I mean, he was a really cool villain, and he has this thing that runs throughout the movie, and you're like, I really hope we get to see this, and we get some sort of payoff with that characteristic that he has. And fortunately we do, and it's awesome. The action sequences were great. The music, the soundtrack for this movie is great. There's an awful lot of songs that you're going to recognize. Even if you're not into them, you'll be like, oh, it's that song. Oh, it's that song. And come on. you will not be able to help but tap your toe to at least one of the tracks. In my opinion, I think the one that sticks with me the most, that's still ringing in my head, is during the opening credits, and I just can't stop listening to it in my head because it's stuck there. And another thing that I really loved about the movie is that, and I don't know if many of you will consider this to be a good thing or a bad thing, but in my opinion, this is a great thing. And that's that this is probably the first Marvel movie that's part of the cinematic universe that has the least, and I mean in fact, almost no references to the Avengers. And I love that because I gotta be honest, I'm a little exhausted, just a tiny bit exhausted of having all these Marvel movies and then putting in references saying, oh, you know, so-and-so is over here, or so-and-so is over here, you know, Tony Stark, Captain America. No references to the Avengers whatsoever. And I love that because obviously it takes place across the galaxy. So obviously, they're not, you know, if they put in the Avengers in there in some kind of reference, I'm going to be pissed because they're just shoving it down our throat at this point. And I love that they didn't give into temptation and say, oh, look who it is. Look, you can kind of see this in the background. Even though I did see something. I did see something during a particular transmission feed. I saw something on the side that I'm like, is that what I think it is? But I'm literally not 100% sure, so I'm going to reserve judgment. And I'm just going to say that this severs an awful lot of ties with the Avengers movies because it makes sense. It takes place across the galaxy. There's only one big connection to the Avengers. And I can't say it because it's a huge spoiler. But when I saw this, I'm like, this is cool. I was not expecting this. I love it. And as I'm driving home, I'm thinking to myself, what did I not like about this movie? And I can barely think of anything. But if I were to, it would literally just be a couple of nitpicks. I already mentioned one, and that is that I wish that there was some sort of development or backstory to the character of Ronan, even though he did kind of describe himself at one point saying, this is what I am. But I wish we could have seen just a little bit more of him and flesh him out as a character instead of this dictator that wants to wipe out civilizations because of what they are. But still, he was a very intimidating character, and Lee Pace killed it as that character. And my other nitpicks, in fact probably just one, would be that the way that Peter Quill comes into this intergalactic universe is a little too convenient. When I saw that at the very beginning, I'm like, even if I saw this in a comic book or if I saw this in a cartoon, which they are making of Guardians of the Galaxy, I would still look at it and go, feels a little artificial. It feels like, hey, look, this just happened to be there, and now he's across the outer space. Yeah. But like I said, barely bothered me. I love this movie. I loved it. 9 out of 10. Okay, I'm just going to give my rating flat out right there. And it's actually a rather high 9 out of 10. And definitely one of my favorite movies of the year so far. And definitely my favorite movie of the summer. Yes, even more than Captain America. But I still love that movie as well. And Marvel's just hitting it, man. Marvel's just hitting it out of the park. Whether it be Marvel Studios or Marvel in association with 20th Century Fox or any other company. Well, Amazing Spider-Man 2. We still have that. And yes, there is an end credit scene, but I do have some feelings about that end credit scene, and I will talk about them in a spoiler video that will be coming soon. But it will probably be a little bit short because being that this movie has very little ties with the Avengers, there's not a whole lot to talk about. But there is some there to warrant a separate video. So I will be doing that. But I will tell you, it's probably one of the weirdest end credit scenes you will see in a Marvel movie to date. I mean, what the fuck? Let me know what you guys thought of Guardians of the Galaxy. Keep it clean, keep it spoiler free, because that video is for another time. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.